Well, we're heading to Thanksgiving Point
fun.
for the Ophir Tintic Western train show.
Wow.
Thanksgiving Point's kind of a neat place.
Yes, it's cool. We used to take the kids there on field trips all the time to go through the corn maze, but we didn't lose any kids on there.
Well, and they have a dinosaur museum and stuff. It was actually started by the guy that started WordPerfect back in the day. Got bought out by Microsoft so they could kill WordPerfect because it was actually competing with Word. And they did, yes. Computer people. Anyway,
Good old days.
WordPerfect went away, and the $1 billion went to building Thanksgiving Point, which is where the train show is. So that's kind of fun. This is always a fun train show because it's the first train show of the year.
Yes.
And that's pretty nifty. It's kind of a small train show, but Ophir Tintic Western guys are fun model club and fun train show. And then we're going over to Tim's house. And Tim is one of the Bingham guys that you know so well.
I talked to him on the internet, on Facebook.
And he's modeled Bingham Canyon. Well, not so much Bingham Canyon, but the mine, the actual Bingham mine is his HO layout. Now that's an unusual layout for somebody to do an open pit mine as a layout, but pretty darn cool. So two things in one. Mostly we're heading over to Tim's house to see his railroad, but we're doing a stop-in route at the train show. Well, one of our New Year's resolutions was to get to a train show just as soon as humanly possible, and that means going to the train show at Thanksgiving Point, the Ophir Tintic Western Club's train show, which they have every year in January, about halfway through January. This is a kind of smaller show. There's some really mega shows, and we're planning to get to a few of those this year too. Perhaps one in Denver where they really put on some massive shows. But this one's just fun, little local show with a lot of the usual suspects showing up. This is the Garden Railroad Society, and they were running exclusively their 1/29th scale trains today. There's several large scales being run in the gardens. Our preference is probably the 120.3 scale narrow gauge steam locomotives. Check this out. This is the local Lego group. There are Lego train sets now. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy, wonderful Lego stuff, but one of the newest things they're getting into are Lego train sets, and a lot of people getting into doing that. Check out this scene from Back to the Future. That's fun. But some really fun train sets running around here. And here we have Bob and Karen with their N-scale modular setup. And here we have the American Flyer Club. These guys always have a panic, and it was good to see them showing up. They have a huge railroad. They just brought part of it. And as always, the ubiquitous HO railroads. Still kind of my favorite, I guess, when it comes to doing modular, because you can do an awful lot in a reasonably small amount of space. Although here at this show, it was predominantly the N-scale guys who were showing up. Now here's a very unusual concept. This is just 4 very large folding tables with a railroad built on top of it. That's kind of intriguing. And of course the founders of the feast, the Ophir Tintic Western guys with an N-scale railroad. Now, when I was a kid, I thought these were the stupidest kits anybody had ever come up with, the Plasticville kits. I think they're incredibly basic, but boy, have I fallen in love with them now 50 years later. They're just sort of intriguing in their own sort of antique, vintage sort of way. These are some antique kits. These are really fun to try to build. In the early days, some of these kits were really basic. It took a lot of skill to put them together. Now here's a handful of the giant relays that used to run CTC systems. If you remember from a few weeks back, Lee Nichols Railroad, which runs on CTC. Okay, finally over to Tim Dumas's railroad, the Bingham Canyon mine in HO scale. He's modeled it down in his basement, and actually this was no mean feat because he didn't actually have a basement in this part of the house. It was just a crawl space. So he crawled out in there with pick and shovel and started building the basement, which now is the railroad. So sort of interesting, his mine railroad is actually sort of a mine when you think about it, a hand-dug mine. The very, very famous Gory and Defeated was built this same way. So the prototype for this railroad was the Bingham Canyon open pit copper mine, not far at all from Tim's house. This was then and is still the largest open pit mine in the world. And Karen and I are both part of a historical society, actually a couple of historical societies that pay homage to this mine. And that's how we met Tim and found out that he had actually modeled the railroad and much of the open pit in his basement. This mining area was really, really something to see when we were kids. It doesn't really look anything at all like this anymore, and it's not open to the public, so you can't go see it anyway. Today, it's just a giant hole over 3,000 feet deep. So Tim is keeping the area alive to some extent here in the basement of his home. And we all like to look at the old photographs of what it looked like back in the day, and Tim has a collection of some 30,000 such photographs, and he's put them into a book. He was a professional bookbinder before retiring, and so he's made up all of these books. He doesn't sell them, but he gave us a couple of them. How cool is that? These old photographs are just absolutely amazing, and Karen and I have been spending hours just thumbing through the pages looking at some of these amazing photographs of the glory days of the Kennecott mine. We've done several shows on the Kennecott Bingham Canyon mine, and boy, they're fascinating. You might want to check those out. I suspect we'll be doing a few more over time as well. But it was sure fun to find out that Tim has modeled this thing here in his basement. Really, really fun. It's almost like time travel. Not quite, but sort of. This is sort of fun. This building was actually in Park City, but it's so cool that Tim decided to move it to Bingham Canyon. One of the things that really jumped out for all of us when we were kids were the giant, giant bridges, just like 100 of these huge bridges to carry all of this terraced railroad in and out of the mine. And it's really cool that Tim's modeled all of these bridges here. And back then, people lived right in the mining operation, and so Tim has paid homage to that too. Hard to imagine the hard life of people actually living in the canyon with the mine. Another really fun thing that Tim has done is he's rigged lights in all of his buildings and even some overhead lighting in the mine itself. He's also used some LED rope lights to create a really cool sunset effect. That way we can really appreciate what his railroad looks like after the shadows fall, which is something that Karen and I always love to see. Well, that was fun.
That was.
Tim's got a really neat railroad
Get to
there.
meet him in person. Usually he's just a face on Facebook.
We've seen pictures on Facebook of the railroad, and we've talked to him a million times, and we've shared all stuff, and he watches the movie. You know, and he's a member of, I think, 2 different groups on
Lark
Facebook.
Group,
The
which
Lark
I
group.
found, the Lark and Bingham Canyon group on Facebook, and they're just a fun group to talk to. Lots of pictures, lots of history.
Fun history, and you could explore that on Facebook if you want to. We are going next week to kind of a strange thing. We're actually digging out some old video going back for years. But if you saw the show some time ago on the Super Coupes, the Ford Daytona Coupe and the Super Coupe that Larry Miller had, Larry Miller died and the whole collection vanished.
Yeah, I'm sad because I love that museum.
It was so cool. I mean, it was just his private collection, but
Right.
we'd show up out there and they just unlock the door and let us go in.
Walk in there, and there's so much history. And
Just $100 million worth of Fords and just go have them all to yourself.
Just go in there and look at all of them like gems in a box.
But then one day they were just gone.
They're gone.
They're
Nobody
just
seemed to
gone.
know
And
where
nobody
they
knew where they went. They were just gone. The family packed them up after he died. And all we could find out is they had removed them to a non-disclosed location, probably for security reasons. They just didn't want anybody to know where they'd put them.
Right.
And anyway, we found them. And what we mostly want to do is go back to the museum, and I'm digging out tape that goes back probably 10 years of the racetrack and Larry Miller and the cars and everything. We're just going to be revisiting his cars. So that should be a good deal of fun. That's next week's show. If you like Fords, and you know, even if you don't, it's pretty amazing to see Fords that are worth $20 million. You know, so that's pretty darn cool to see. Well, if you haven't been over to the channel, do pop on over to the channel. And of course you want to subscribe while you're going over to the channel. And this is achievable with the blue button, zoing, right there, blue button that says subscribe, takes you to the channel, makes you a subscriber, makes you cool. Anyway, we're not sure how you found this movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again in 1 week with some more screwing around, this time at the Miller collection.